I got the voicemail at 2:03 a.m. My phone buzzed twice on the nightstand, right as I was in that half-dreamy place between sleep and full consciousness. I didn't check it right away. I figured it was a spam text or a glitchy notification from some app one hadn't used in weeks. But something in my chest tugged me out of bed like a thread being pulled tight. I grabbed the phone, squinting at the screen in the glow of the night light I never stopped using. One missed call from Mom, and one new voicemail. The timestamp glared like a warning. Don't bother coming for Thanksgiving. I've already told my attorney to remove you from everything. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I just stared at the phone for a solid minute. Not because I was confused, but because I wasn't. Let me rewind for a second. My name is Carter. I'm 31, and if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that nothing cuts deeper than family betrayal. Not just because it hurts, but because it always seems to come wrapped in guilt, dressed up in words like tradition, sacrifice, or you should be grateful. I used to buy into all of it. I used to think loyalty meant shutting up, smiling, and swallowing the bitterness like bad wine at Christmas. But that night, that voicemail, that was the last time my mother would ever talk to me like she owned me. It wasn't always this bad, though. When I was younger, our family looked perfect from the outside. Classic white picket fence suburbia. My dad passed when I was 11, and after that, it was just me, my younger sister Ava, and Mom. She held it together, or at least looked like she did. Kept working her job as a financial advisor, paid the mortgage, made sure we had Christmas gifts and matching sweaters. But slowly, like a storm forming far out over the ocean, something started to twist in her. She was always more forgiving with Ava. I mean, I get it, Ava was the baby. But by the time I hit high school, it became clear that forgiving meant Ava could do no wrong. Wreck the family car? I got blamed for setting a bad example. Forgot to pick her up after cheer practice one time because I had detention? Mom screamed at me like I'd left her in the middle of the desert. Every little misstep from me became a moral failing. Every mistake of Ava's was a learning moment. It didn't take long to realize I was playing a rigged game. Still, I stuck around. I helped raise Ava more than I probably should have. Took on part-time jobs in college just to send money back home. When I landed my first decent-paying job in tech at 24, I was excited to finally give my mom a break. I even offered to help her pay down her mortgage. But that was the beginning of the shift. That's when the power dynamic turned on its head. She didn't say thank you. She acted like I owed her. Like my success was hers by default. At first, it was little things. Subtle digs at my lifestyle, my choices, the fact that I didn't visit enough. Then came the financial suggestions, always couched in guilt. You know, Ava's still finding herself. Maybe you could help her with her car insurance this month? Or, I was thinking of taking a vacation, and things have been so stressful lately. You make more than enough to help. And every time, I helped. Not because I was a pushover, but because I didn't want to rock the boat. I wanted to be the good son, the reliable one, the one who held things together. But then came last year's Thanksgiving. I had flown in from Seattle, first class, on my own dime, and brought along my girlfriend, Layla, who I had been dating for a little over a year. She was nervous, sweet, trying to make a good impression. We showed up with a bottle of wine, a pie, the whole deal. From the moment we walked through the door, Mom gave her the coldest greeting imaginable. No smile, no warmth, just that tight-lipped, judgmental look I knew far too well. I brushed it off at first. Maybe she was stressed, overwhelmed, still in her head about dinner prep. But then at the dinner table, in front of the extended family, she smiled sweetly and said, "So Carter, when are you going to settle down and find a real partner?" The air froze. Layla looked down at her plate. I felt heat rising behind my ears. I laughed awkwardly. "Mom, Layla's literally right here." She blinked, feigning innocence. "I know. I just mean someone who fits our family better. Someone less temporary." It wasn't even about Layla, really. It was about control. It always was. That night was the first time I stood up to her. Nothing explosive. Just a quiet, calm, "That's enough, Mom." But in her mind, it was betrayal. I had crossed the line, chosen someone else over her. And she never forgot it. The months after that were tense. Ava reached out a few times, saying Mom was feeling hurt and confused. I tried to call. Got stonewalled. I sent birthday flowers. They were returned to the sender. Layla and I broke up eventually. Unrelated reasons, but I never told Mom. Didn't feel like giving her that satisfaction. And then came the summer. Aunt Diane, my dad's sister, passed away suddenly. She and I had stayed close over the years. She was like a second mother to me in a lot of ways. We used to talk every Sunday, just chatting about life, work, relationships. She always told me she wanted to leave something behind for me, something meaningful. I never expected much, but I guess Diane had made some serious investments over the years. Real estate, stocks, a couple of antique properties upstate that she'd inherited and quietly renovated. When she passed, I was shocked to find out she'd left me everything. Not split between the family, just everything. Full inheritance. No stipulations. Mom didn't take that well. She didn't say anything to my face, but the passive aggression started dripping through Ava. Snide texts, group chats where I was conveniently left out. Then came the rumors that I had manipulated Diane, that I had pressured an old woman into leaving me her estate. Absurd, but enough to get cousins whispering and extended family giving me weird looks at a cousin's wedding. It didn't matter. I stayed quiet. I didn't need to prove anything. I used some of the money to pay off my student loans. Bought a little cabin in the woods as a weekend getaway. Started seriously considering what life would look like if I stepped back from the family for good. Which brings me back to this voicemail. I played it again just to be sure I hadn't imagined the coldness. I've already told my attorney to remove you from everything. Everything. The family trust. The property in Florida my grandfather left us. The slice of land upstate Mom always said would be mine someday. The ironic part? I hadn't even asked for any of it. I had my own life now. My own money. But the fact that she was dangling it like a weapon, trying to punish me for a perceived disloyalty, that's what got me. I didn't reply right away. I just sat in bed, staring at the wall. My fingers drummed against the phone like they had a mind of their own. And slowly, quietly, the gears started turning. 3 phone calls. That's all it took. And by sunrise, the foundation of her little empire was already starting to shake. But I didn't answer her next call, or the one after that. And when Monday morning hit, and she started calling every 10 minutes like clockwork, I knew exactly why she was panicking. She didn't call me son anymore. That was the first thing I noticed after the voicemail. When she finally stopped spamming my phone long enough for me to check the messages, there were 12 of them between 8 a.m. and noon Monday. Most of them just her breathing into the receiver or half starting a sentence before hanging up. The ones that followed were cold, clipped, and overly formal. Carter, this has gone far enough. I don't know what you've done, but you need to call me back immediately. This is still family. Still family. That line stuck with me. Like I was the one who had left or threatened legal action in the middle of the night. Like I was the one who had spent the last decade slowly rewriting what family meant into something transactional, conditional, and paper thin. But we weren't there yet. Not fully. This was still the part where the house of cards was swaying, not collapsing. The thing about people like my mother is they don't blow up all at once. They test the waters. They'll give you just enough kindness to make you question your own boundaries, just enough gaslight to keep the air murky. And if you give an inch, they take the continent. That Monday, I didn't respond. I went for a walk instead, just me and the breeze slicing through the pines behind my cabin. It was crisp, early November air, the kind that smells like wood smoke and makes you think in long, quiet thoughts. I let the world be silent for a few hours. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and wrote out everything I remembered from the last 2 years. Every favor asked, every backhanded insult, every family gathering where Ava was praised like a saint for showing up 10 minutes late while I got side-eyed for not bringing enough wine. And I remembered something important. The summer before Diane passed, she had called me about something odd, Mom asking if there was an updated version of her will. Diane had laughed about it, assuming Mom was just being nosy, but it stuck with me. Why would my mother, who hadn't spoken to Diane much in recent years, be asking about her will? I reached out to Diane's lawyer, Mr. LeBlanc. He remembered the conversation. Mom had called him 3 times that year. Just curiosity, she claimed. That wasn't even the part that made me angry. What made me angry was that she hadn't even pretended to hide it. She was digging before Diane had even gotten sick, like she saw her as nothing more than an uncashed check. I wondered how many conversations Ava had been a part of, how many passive-aggressive dinners they'd had, strategizing behind closed doors about how to secure the estate. Then suddenly, none of them got it. Because Diane made sure it went to me, alone. No split. No confusion. That's when I realized they never saw me as the black sheep. They saw me as the vault. And once I stopped being accessible, Once I started setting boundaries, I stopped being useful. That night, my cousin Erin called me. She was always a little removed from the rest of the family drama. A nurse. Hardworking. Honest to a fault. She's saying you're trying to sue her, Erin said, voice low and shaky. Like, literally spreading rumors that you're going after the family trust because of something in Grandpa's will. She told Aunt Marie that you're disrupting the family legacy. What the hell's going on? I laughed. I couldn't help it. I haven't filed anything, Erin. Not even close. I haven't even said anything. She's unraveling because I didn't play along. Erin hesitated. Carter, she showed us a letter. Looked official. Said you were working with a financial investigator. That made me pause. Because that was true. One of the 3 phone calls I'd made after that 2 a.m. voicemail was to a contact I had through work, a forensic accountant named Daniel. We'd collaborated on a few white-collar fraud audits over the years, and he owed me a favor. I didn't give him much. Just a name, some approximate figures, and a couple of account numbers from the old joint property fund that had been established after my dad passed away. It was supposed to be held in trust for both me and Ava, set aside until we were older, to help with college, first homes, medical expenses, all of that. I had never seen a dime. Ava, on the other hand, got a down payment on a condo last year. Just a little help from Mom, she said when I confronted her. And besides, you're doing fine. I was doing fine, but that didn't mean it was right. Daniel promised he'd quietly poke around. Said he'd get back to me within a week. And now, somehow Mom already knew. Which meant only one thing. Ava. She must have seen something. Overheard something. Or maybe she had access to one of Mom's email accounts. Either way, someone spilled. And now the panic was setting in. I stayed quiet. The silence was my favorite part. For years, my mother had trained me to think that silence was weakness. That if I didn't immediately respond, I was being disrespectful or cold. That every missed call was an emotional landmine waiting to go off. But now the silence was power. 3 days passed. By Thursday, she wasn't just calling. She was reaching out through extended family, sending messages through second cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Carter, your mom's worried about you. Your mom's not feeling well. She says she's afraid you're getting manipulated. I ignored them all, but I kept the messages, because they were starting to form a pattern. And that's when the real breaking point happened. Saturday morning, I was at a coffee shop in town, sipping a black coffee and trying to clear my head, when I got a text from Ava. Just one sentence. You know you don't deserve any of this, right? No context. No hello. Just that. And suddenly I felt like I was back in high school, coming home after pulling a double shift at the grocery store, only to find Ava's friends raiding the fridge, blasting music, and laughing about how I acted like Dad died just to get attention. No one said anything back then. Not Mom. Not even Ava. And now, more than a decade later, it was still the same game. I didn't respond. But something in me cracked open. I went home, dug out an old fireproof box from the closet, one of the only things I'd taken from Mom's house when I moved out. Inside were a few old documents, mostly forgotten. My birth certificate, my dad's death certificate, and the original deed to the upstate land. My dad had signed it over jointly to me and Ava when we were kids. But there was a clause in the margin I'd never noticed before. Handwritten, notarized. If either party forfeits interest or fails to maintain stewardship, full title may revert to the remaining heir at discretion of legal counsel. I stared at it for a long time. Ava hadn't visited the property in over 10 years. I, on the other hand, had been quietly paying the taxes every year. It wasn't just about money now. It was about history, legacy, and truth. That same afternoon, I drove out to the property, took photos, logged into the county records website, and pulled everything I could. And then I called Mr. LeBlanc again. He picked up on the second ring. I was hoping you'd follow up, he said. Things are heating up on my end too. Apparently, Mom had already contacted her lawyer. She was attempting to restructure the family trust retroactively. Something that wasn't illegal, but certainly unethical, especially if it involved forged documentation. Mr. LeBlanc didn't confirm anything directly, but he hinted. She's acting like someone who's afraid of being found out, he said. If I were you, Carter, I'd prepare for things to get uglier before they get cleaner. And he was right. That night, I got an email from a private address. No subject line, just a PDF attached. It was a scanned letter, dated 6 months ago, addressed from my mother to a lawyer I'd never heard of. In it, She claimed Ava had been sole caregiver to Diane during her final months, and that I had severed contact for personal reasons, rendering me unsuitable to manage any inheritance on Diane's behalf. My jaw clenched. That was a lie. Diane had passed unexpectedly. No one was her caregiver. She was active until the end, gardening, traveling, hosting weekend dinners. I had text threads, emails, photos, even voicemails from her just weeks before she passed. She and I were as close as ever. This letter was a preemptive strike, a quiet campaign to paint me as estranged, unstable, uninvolved. And worse, it was in Ava's handwriting at the bottom. A co-signed statement. That was the betrayal. Not just that they tried to steal from me, but that they tried to erase me. And that's when I knew this wasn't going to end with a phone call. It was going to end in courtrooms, in title transfers, in cold, hard evidence. But not yet. I had one more move to make, one more call to place, and this one would flip everything upside down. For the first time in years, I felt completely unmoored. It wasn't just the betrayal itself, it was how precise it had all been. Surgical, like they'd been planning it for months, maybe years, all while smiling through family photos and wishing me happy birthday with a forced chuckle and a gift card I'd never use. That letter, the fake caregiver claim, Ava's signature, it was all so calculated. A narrative they'd crafted behind closed doors and waited to unleash the moment I stopped playing along. And I'll admit it, for about 2 weeks, it broke me. I stopped answering texts, stopped checking emails. I worked remotely, so I canceled meetings, postponed deadlines, and set my Slack status to away. I told my boss I was dealing with a family emergency, which wasn't a lie, really. I didn't even leave the cabin except to check the mail or chop firewood. And when my cousin Aaron texted me again, asking if I was okay, I didn't respond. I wasn't sure what okay even looked like anymore. The nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, reliving conversations with my mom and Ava from years ago, trying to see if the signs had always been there. If they'd ever really seen me as part of the family, or just a safety net they could cut the moment I became inconvenient. Every joke, every backhanded compliment, every time Mom referred to Ava as my little miracle, while I was sitting right there, they all played on repeat. It felt like mourning something I hadn't realized was dead until now. And then came the breaking point within the breaking point. I got a notification on my phone one night, an alert that a listing had gone live for a cozy upstate fixer-upper with major historical value. It was my cabin, the one Diane had left me. They had listed it. I clicked through the photos, and sure enough, there it was. My porch, my stone fireplace, the old oak tree I had strung Christmas lights around last winter. The listing even mentioned property recently consolidated into family trust, title pending. I stared at that sentence until the words blurred. Somehow, they'd forged something, filed some kind of temporary claim. Maybe it wouldn't hold up in court, but that didn't matter. They were testing me, seeing if I'd blink, seeing if I'd just give it up without a fight, hoping I'd spiral far enough that I'd just hand it all over, exhausted and defeated. And for a moment, I almost did. I remember walking outside that night, standing barefoot in the frost-covered grass behind the cabin, and whispering into the cold air, maybe it's not worth it. Because it wasn't just the inheritance. It wasn't just the money or the property or even the betrayal. It was that they knew how to hurt me. That they knew the one thing I had left, peace, solitude, the quiet legacy Diane had passed down, and they were willing to take even that just to win. But then something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed again, a voicemail this time, from an unknown number. I didn't recognize the voice at first. It was gravelly, older, tired. "Carter, this is Henry. I'm your grandfather's old attorney. Diane gave me your number before she passed. Said if anything ever looked suspicious, I should reach out. I've been seeing some activity lately that doesn't sit right with me. If you have time, I'd like to talk." I called him back instantly. We talked for almost an hour. Turns out, Diane had anticipated something like this. Not exactly. She hadn't known the exact form it would take, but she had suspected Mom might try to twist things once she was gone. In one of her final meetings with Henry, she'd left behind a sealed file with a list of instructions and documentation, naming me as the sole beneficiary of her estate with stipulations, including a clause about any undue influence or coercive legal maneuvers executed by other family members being considered a breach of will integrity. Henry offered to send me a scanned copy of the file. I asked him if he thought it would hold up in court. Absolutely, he said. Especially with what you've told me. And just like that, the fog lifted. I wasn't powerless. They wanted me to believe I was. That was their first and most important move, isolating me, making me feel like I was the villain, like I had somehow broken the family apart by simply defending myself. But I wasn't the one twisting the truth. I wasn't the one forging letters. I wasn't the one rewriting history. And if I let them get away with it, I'd be complicit in that lie. So, I started getting organized. First, I made copies, dozens of them, of every document I had. The original property deeds, my email exchanges with Diane, texts with Ava, screenshots of the fake real estate listing, the forged letter with Ava's signature. I backed them up on 3 separate hard drives and stored one with a lawyer in Seattle who I trusted implicitly, someone outside the family network. Then, I hired a local attorney near the cabin, someone recommended by Henry. Her name was Lisa Chong, and from the first conversation, I knew she was exactly the kind of person I needed. No nonsense, no delay, and no mercy, she said, flipping through the file I handed her. They picked the wrong guy to corner. We filed a temporary injunction on the property listing first. That was easy. Within 48 hours, the listing had been pulled. Whoever had posted it got a cease and desist order so aggressive I wouldn't be surprised if they stopped sleeping for a week. Then we got to work on the bigger piece, preparing to challenge the forged documents and reinforce the terms of Diane's will. Lisa filed preliminary motions, contacted county officials to flag suspicious transfers, and quietly opened a civil inquiry into misuse of trust funds. In the middle of all this, I started rebuilding my own sense of self, quietly, intentionally. I reconnected with old friends I hadn't spoken to in years, explained what had been going on. Most were shocked, some weren't, but all of them listened. One of them, Jamie, invited me to a weekend camping trip in the Cascades. I almost said no. Then I said yes. And something about that trip shifted something deep inside me. Sitting around a campfire with people who didn't see me as a bank account or a trader, laughing over stories from college, roasting marshmallows like we were kids again, it reminded me that my family didn't define me. My values did. And that gave me the courage to take one more step. I emailed Ava. Just one sentence. I know what you did. She didn't reply, but I saw the read receipt. She opened it 4 times. The next day, I got an anonymous voicemail from what sounded like my mother's lawyer. It was vague, but clearly intended to intimidate. Vague talk of misunderstandings, settlement options, avoiding unnecessary escalation. I didn't even flinch, because by then, Daniel, the forensic accountant, had finished his report. Turns out, the family trust had been dipped into dozens of times over the years, for Ava's rent, car, tuition, travel, even cosmetic procedures. None of it reported properly, all of it traceable. And most damning of all, some of the withdrawals had been backdated and funneled through dummy accounts that were tied, indirectly, to Mom's financial advisory firm. Fraud, tax evasion, and maybe, depending on how it shook out, embezzlement. Lisa looked over the findings and gave a low whistle. They've really outdone themselves. We talked through options. We could go nuclear immediately, press charges, file lawsuits, drag them through court until they were gasping for air. But something about that felt hollow. Too fast. Too loud. I wanted something quieter. Smarter. More patient. Because I knew them. I knew how Mom operated. How she controlled narratives, manipulated perceptions, played the victim even as she sharpened her knives. So instead of swinging hard, I let the silence grow again. No response. No confrontation. No reply. Just stillness. And in that stillness, I rebuilt. I spent weekends at the cabin fixing things. The railing on the back deck, the shutters on the windows, the old bench Diane used to sit on while drinking her morning coffee. I started taking care of the land again, trimming branches, planting new flowers, even building a little greenhouse out back with salvaged wood. Every morning, I woke up with the sun and reminded myself, they do not own you. Every night, I went to bed knowing, this is yours. Earned, protected, chosen. And slowly, I became someone new. Not the desperate son begging for scraps of approval. Not the scapegoat brother trying to keep the peace. But the man who stood his ground. Who knew his worth. Who refused to be erased. And just when they thought I was done, just when they thought I had moved on and left the playing field, I pulled out my final piece. Because what Mom and Ava didn't know What no one outside a few key people knew was that Diane had left behind more than just property and money. She left behind something else, and it was about to change everything. I waited until the first snow, not because I had to, but because it felt right. There's something about snowfall that silences the world, like the air holds its breath. That morning, I stood at the edge of the property, watching fresh flakes blanket the cabin roof, the pine needles, the gravel path I'd shoveled the day before. Everything looked still, pure, untouched. It was the kind of silence I used to mistake for loneliness. Now it felt like clarity. For the past 6 weeks, I'd kept my head down, my mouth shut, and my focus sharp. Lisa and Daniel had handled the legal side, and Henry had quietly reached out to a few county clerks to correct the record on some misfiled paperwork my mother's lawyer had submitted. Another failed attempt to blur the line between what belonged to me and what they thought they were entitled to. But this story was never going to be won with just paperwork. It needed precision, timing, and a little bit of patience. Because what my mother had never figured out, not when I was a teenager, not when I graduated college, not even when I bought my first place, was that I don't shout when I'm angry. I build, quietly, methodically, one layer at a time. And this time, I wasn't building alone. It started with a memory, something Diane told me a few months before she passed. We were sitting on her porch, sipping lemonade, watching the sun go down. She'd mentioned her old friend from college, a woman named Elaine who used to work for the IRS and then moved into private investigation work after retirement. She's sharp as a tack, Diane had said with a little smile. Always said she could smell a liar faster than a hound smells meat. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Just another one of Diane's colorful friends from her past. But after Daniel's report and the forged documents surfaced, I found myself thinking about Elaine more and more. I dug through Diane's old address book, the one she used to keep in a drawer by the kitchen phone. Yellowed pages, messy handwriting, names crossed out or rewritten over time. And there she was, Elaine B., with a New Hampshire number scrawled next to her name in faded blue ink. I called. Elaine answered on the third ring. Diane always said you'd call me one day, she said, not even asking who I was. We talked for an hour. I explained everything. The trust fund siphoning, the forged caregiver letters, the fake listing, the backdated transfers. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she just let out a low hum. Your mother's been sloppy, she said. Greedy people usually are. And when they feel control slipping, they start making mistakes. Over the next few days, Elaine started gathering data, digging into my mother's finances, pulling old property tax filings, reviewing the firm where she worked as a financial advisor. And what she found only made things clearer. My mother had borrowed from clients. Technically, the term was personal loans, small, unreported sums from elderly clients whose paperwork was rarely updated. Some were dead, some wouldn't remember signing, and all of it had been swept under the rug, likely repaid through other manipulations or covered up with doctored statements. It wasn't enough for criminal charges, not yet, but it painted a very clear picture of someone playing a long game of control and image management. And it gave me leverage, because if there's one thing my mother feared more than losing control, it was losing face. But even with Elaine on the team, I knew we needed more than information. We needed pressure. Public pressure. That's where Ava came in. I hadn't spoken to her since the letter. She hadn't replied to my text. But I had something she didn't know I had. A voicemail. Not the kind she left me. A different one. 6 months ago, when Diane was in the hospital for a minor procedure. Nothing serious, just routine. She had left me a message. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now, it read like a confession. Hey Carter, her voice said, warm and steady. Your mom called me again today, asking weird questions. She wants to know if I've changed my will. I told her it's none of her business. She didn't like that. Just, be careful, okay? Something's off. I had saved it without thinking. Now it was evidence. I sent it to Lisa. Her reply was almost instant. This is gold. From there, I began preparing the stage. First, I drafted a letter, formal, cold, and deliberate. It listed every violation I had documented, the misuse of funds, the falsified property claims, the forged letters, and the indirect tampering with Diane's estate. I included the voicemail transcript, a summary of Daniel's forensic findings, Elaine's initial report, and at the end, I attached one final page. Notice of intent to seek civil damages and full control of disputed assets. But I didn't send it to Mom. Not yet. I sent it to Ava, and I sent it anonymously. That night, at exactly 2 a.m., poetic timing, I got a call from a private number. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, I listened. "Carter, what are you doing?" It was Ava, her voice breathless. "You don't understand. Mom said we were just protecting the family. She said you didn't want it, that you didn't deserve it. You had Diane. I didn't." She paused. "Please don't do this." I didn't call back, because that wasn't the goal. The goal wasn't to get her to confess. The goal was to break the alliance. People like my mother rely on enablers, on willing foot soldiers who will carry out their plans in exchange for approval, protection, or scraps of inheritance. But when those alliances crack, when doubt creeps in, the whole pyramid collapses. And Ava had just cracked. A few days later, I learned she'd scheduled a meeting with a different attorney. Lisa confirmed it through a contact. She wasn't filing anything. Not yet. But she was asking questions. I smiled when I heard that. Then I made my final call. To the board of directors at the firm where my mother worked. I didn't go in guns blazing. I didn't accuse her of crimes. I simply submitted an anonymous tip, backed with carefully worded documentation from Elaine and Daniel, suggesting that one of their advisors may have engaged in undisclosed borrowing practices and that a quiet internal audit might be in the firm's best interest before the information reached regulatory agencies. I knew how corporate structures worked. I knew they'd look into it, and I knew they'd find enough smoke to start sniffing for fire. Whether or not they confronted her directly, the damage would be done. Her stability would be shaken. Her allies would go quiet. Her emails would be monitored, and she would feel it. But still, I didn't reach out. Not to Mom. Not to Ava. Not to anyone. Instead, I hosted a dinner. It was small, just Aaron, Lisa, Daniel, and Elaine. We sat around the fireplace at the cabin, shared wine, roasted vegetables, laughed about how Aaron once dyed her hair green in middle school and blamed it on me. It wasn't a victory party. Not yet. It was a gratitude circle, because I wasn't in this alone anymore. I looked around that room and realized I had something they didn't. Real allies. People who didn't need to be manipulated or bribed or guilt-tripped into standing beside me. People who chose me. And that's when I finally knew it was time. Time to send the letter. Time to pull the last thread. Time to end this. But not with anger. With precision. And when I finally delivered that final blow, it wouldn't just shake their world. It would shatter it. I sent the letter on a Tuesday morning. Not electronically. Not through a lawyer's office. I printed it, bound it neatly, and sent it certified mail so there would be no ambiguity about when it arrived or who signed for it. One copy to my mother. One copy to Ava. One copy to my mother's law firm. And one copy, quietly, carefully, to the compliance department of her financial advisory firm, accompanied by a short cover note that simply said, "You may want to review this before it becomes public." I didn't feel nervous when I dropped the envelopes off at the post office. I felt calm. That afternoon, my phone rang for the first time in weeks. Mom's number lit up the screen. I let it ring out. 2 minutes later, Ava called. Then Mom again. Then an unknown number, which I assumed was her lawyer. I didn't answer any of them. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was allowing consequences to arrive on schedule. By Wednesday morning, the real estate listing hadn't just been taken down. It had been flagged internally by the brokerage. Apparently, someone on their end had realized the documentation backing the listing was inconsistent. Titles that didn't line up. Trust language that didn't match county records. A seller who wasn't actually authorized to sell. Lisa called me just after breakfast. "They're scrambling," she said. "Your mother's attorney requested an emergency meeting to clarify misunderstandings. The county clerk forwarded us a copy of the forged affidavit." And I asked. And it's bad. Sloppy bad. That afternoon, Daniel forwarded me an update. The internal audit at my mother's firm had been quietly initiated. One of her longtime clients, an elderly man whose account she'd borrowed from years ago, had been contacted for verification. He didn't remember authorizing anything. Neither did his daughter. Elaine followed that up with her own message. "They're circling the wagons." That usually means someone's about to get thrown out. By Thursday, Ava finally texted me. "Please, we need to talk." I told her we could meet Saturday. Neutral location. Coffee shop halfway between the city and the cabin. She agreed almost instantly. She looked smaller than I remembered when she walked in. Not physically, emotionally. Her shoulders were hunched, her eyes darting around like she expected someone to be watching. She sat down across from me and immediately started talking, words tumbling out in a rush. Mom didn't tell me everything, she said. She said you didn't want the land, that you were planning to sell it anyway. She said Diane changed her will because you manipulated her. She said, I know what she said, I interrupted gently. I also know what you signed. Ava swallowed. Her hands were shaking. She told me it was just a formality, she said. She said it was to protect the family. I didn't think. You didn't think, I repeated. That's the problem. She looked up at me then, eyes glossy. What's going to happen to her? I considered lying, or softening it, or telling her what she wanted to hear. But I was done cushioning the truth. She's going to lose everything she built on lies, I said. And you need to decide whether you're going down with her or stepping away. She stared at her coffee for a long time. I can give you copies of the emails, she said finally. The ones she sent me. Instructions. What to say. What to sign. I nodded. That's a start. She slid her phone across the table. I didn't even look at it right away. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she said. I don't want to be like her. I believed her. Or at least, I believe she believed that in the moment. Then don't, I said. But understand this. I'm not protecting you anymore. Whatever happens next, happens. She nodded again. We didn't hug. We didn't make promises. We stood up, paid separately, and walked out different doors. That was the last time I saw Ava for a long while. Friday was the day everything collapsed. My mother's firm placed her on administrative leave pending investigation. Her access to client accounts was revoked immediately. By noon, the state regulatory board had been notified of potential compliance violations. Her lawyer tried to negotiate, quietly, desperately, but Lisa shut it down. There's nothing to negotiate, she told them. You don't get to bargain with evidence. That evening, my mother showed up at the cabin. I knew it was her before I even saw her. The way the gravel crunched. The way the knock came sharp and insistent, like she still believed she had authority here. I opened the door. She looked older than I remembered. Not frail, just stripped of the polish she'd always worn like armor. Her voice trembled when she spoke. You did this, she said. Not a question. An accusation. I didn't forge anything, I replied. I didn't steal from anyone. I didn't lie to lawyers or manipulate documents. She stepped inside without being invited, eyes scanning the room like she was searching for something she could still control. You always were ungrateful, she said. After everything I gave up for you. There it was. The familiar refrain. I gave up my career. My life. I raised you alone. You raised us, I corrected. And then you decided that love was something to be earned. Her face twisted. I did what I had to do. No, I said quietly. You did what benefited you. She laughed then, sharp and hollow. You think you've won? This will destroy the family. I looked at her and felt nothing. No anger. No triumph. Just clarity. You destroyed this family, I said. I just stopped covering for you. She reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and shoved it toward me. Call them. Call your lawyer. Tell them to stop. We can fix this. I didn't take the phone. There's nothing to fix, I said. This is accountability. Her shoulders sagged then. Just a little. You were always like your father, she murmured. Too principled for your own good. I opened the door and held it open. You should go, I said. She stood there for a moment, like she might say something else. Something honest. Something human. She didn't. By Monday, the fallout was complete. My mother resigned from her firm under pressure. The regulatory board opened a formal investigation. Several clients withdrew their accounts. Her attorney advised her to settle quietly to avoid criminal charges. She agreed. The settlement stripped her of her license and required restitution. The family trust was dissolved under court supervision. The misused funds were traced, documented, and partially recovered. Ava was removed as a beneficiary due to her involvement, though she avoided charges by cooperating fully. The upstate land was retitled solely in my name, permanently. Diane's will was reaffirmed in court without challenge. And Thanksgiving came and went. I spent it at the cabin with friends. Aaron brought pie. Jamie brought terrible wine. We ate too much, laughed loudly, and took a long walk through the woods as the sun set early and golden. No voicemail. No threats. No guilt. Just peace. A month later, I received one final letter from my mother. No legal language. No demands. Just a single line, written in unsteady handwriting. I hope one day you understand why I did what I did. I folded it carefully and placed it in the fire. Some things don't need to be understood. They just need to be ended. I still go to the cabin every winter. I still pay the taxes. I still sit on the porch Diane loved and watch the snow fall in silence. And every time I do, I remember this. Family isn't who tries to own you. Family is who stands with you when you finally stand up for yourself.